All right, let's dive right into this explainer and explore the hidden, ancient mechanisms working right behind one of the world's most famous modern landmarks. You know, when millions of people visit Rome every single year, they completely marvel at the stunning architecture, the incredible history visible on literally every street corner. But actually, some of the most profound achievements of the ancient world, they aren't towering up in the sky, they are buried right beneath our feet, quietly doing their jobs for millennia. Today, we're going to look at a true masterpiece of engineering that has quite literally stood the test of time. And the crazy thing? It all revolves around something as simple, yet absolutely vital, as water.
So if you've ever seen pictures of Rome, or maybe you've been lucky enough to visit yourself, you definitely know the Trevi Fountain. It's an absolute masterpiece of 18th century art. Back then, architect Nicholas Salvi selected this highly specific site for the fountain. But he didn't just pick some random plaza because it looked nice. No, he chose this exact location as a monumental termination point for a massive working hydraulic system. The grand Baroque facade we see today, complete with those super dramatic figures of Oceanus and the rearing seahorses, that wasn't built just for decoration. It was built to celebrate the arrival of water. Which begs a really fascinating question. Where exactly is all of that rushing water actually coming from?
Astonishingly, the water flowing into the basin of the Trevi Fountain today comes from the exact same springs identified by Roman engineers over 2,000 years ago. Let that sink in for a second. When you stand there watching the water cascade over the marble statues, you are looking at a supply chain that has remained perfectly intact for over 2 millennia. It's this continuous, unbroken line connecting a modern tourist right back to an ancient Roman citizen.
Let's move to our first core topic, quenching a booming metropolis.
So this whole story kicks off back in 19 BC. Rome's population was absolutely booming. The city was expanding rapidly, and a specific area, known as the Campus Martius, was in desperate need of a reliable supply of clean water to sustain its brand new public baths, its fountains, and its lush gardens. To solve this major issue, general and statesman Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, who, by the way, was a highly trusted ally of Emperor Augustus, commissioned a massive new public works project. It became known as the Aqua Virgo. Now, the goal sounded incredibly simple on paper, right? Carry fresh spring water from the countryside straight into the heart of Rome. But the execution? It was anything but simple. They had to design a channel stretching just over 20 kilometers, tracing a meticulously chosen path from springs located east of the city.
Moving right along to Section 2, the gravity-powered miracle.
What makes the Aqua Virgo truly, undeniably remarkable is its total reliance on gravity. Think about how we move water today. We use massive electric pumps, pressurized pipes, highly computerized flow systems. The Romans, they had none of that. Zero. There were no punks, no wheels, absolutely no mechanical aids of any kind helping to push this water along its 20-kilometer journey. The water moved solely because the channel followed a precise, uninterrupted downward slope from the countryside all the way into the city center.
And this right here perfectly illustrates the razor-thin margin of error those ancient surveyors were up against. I mean, this wasn't just a matter of digging a big trench. That downward slope had to be mathematically exact. If the slope was even slightly too steep, the rushing water would build up way too much speed, eroding the stone over time and eventually collapsing the entire system. But on the flip side, if the slope was too shallow, the flow would lose its momentum, and the water would just stagnate. To achieve this perfect, delicate balance, Roman engineers used basic instruments, geometry, and just their own hard-won experience. They calculated gradients so unbelievably subtle that the drop over long distances was sometimes just a few centimeters per 100 meters. It's an absolutely stunning feat of precision.
Which brings us to our next section, surviving the Dark Ages. Now, when we typically picture Roman aqueducts, we almost always imagine those massive, towering stone arches crossing valleys. But the Aqua Virgo was entirely different, and that difference, that was its superpower. Nearly its entire route ran completely underground, and this underground advantage did several crucial things. First, it completely protected the drinking water from contamination. Second, it guarded the physical structure from severe weather damage. Third, and perhaps most importantly given the times, it kept the aqueduct completely hidden from deliberate attacks by invading armies. And finally, it actually made it way easier to maintain than those massive elevated structures. It was simply out of sight and out of harm's way. The end result of this brilliant hidden design was a system of absolutely exceptional durability. Just think about the chaotic eras this single piece of infrastructure survived. In 410 AD, you have the devastating sack of Rome. Over the centuries that followed, you've got the immense instability and total neglect of the Middle Ages. While invasions, neglect, and political collapse systematically destroyed or disabled almost all of the other magnificent Roman aqueducts, the Aqua Virgo, it endured. It just kept running, largely unnoticed, quietly delivering fresh water right beneath the city's streets century after century, all the way up to the 18th century when the Trevi Fountain was finally built to cap it off.
And that brings us to our final section, the ultimate engineering legacy. The Aqua Virgo is entirely unique in human history. It remains the only Roman aqueduct that has operated continuously from antiquity right up to the present day. It has literally never once ceased its flow. Just think about how many empires have risen and fallen, how many massive wars have been fought, and how many technological revolutions have happened since 19 BC. Through it all, the Aqua Virgo has reliably delivered fresh water, ultimately arriving at that spectacular Baroque facade of the Trevi Fountain. It's basically a living, breathing artifact.
But its endurance isn't magic, right? It rests entirely on the foundational principles of Roman engineering. They prioritized absolute longevity in their public works. They weren't building for a few decades. They were building for centuries. This required a profound understanding of water behavior and the local terrain. And above all else, they designed in harmony with natural forces. Instead of trying to somehow overpower nature with brute force machinery, they used nature's own laws, like gravity, to do the heavy lifting for them. The Aqua Virgo stands as this quiet but incredibly powerful example of function-driven design.
Which leaves us with this final, genuinely profound question to ponder. No electricity powers the Aqua Virgo. No engines drive it. Yet it has given us over 2,000 years of continuous flow. When we look at our own modern infrastructure today, our water mains that constantly burst, our power grids that fail, our bridges that require endless, expensive maintenance, how is it that engineers 2 millennia ago managed to build a machine so perfectly attuned to nature that it completely outlasts the things we build today? Definitely something to think about the next time you turn on a tap or the next time you find yourself tossing a coin into the Trevi Fountain.